us Cantor David Wisnia, who I've had the opportunity, I read a little bit about in the Jewish Exponent, and I've had a couple of opportunities to speak to him on the telephone. I'm not going to read his whole bio because that's why it's printed in the program. You're all welcome to read of his incredible experiences growing up in Poland, and his experiences in the Shoah, and his experiences since then. What I will say of Cantor David Wisnia in the few moments, the few conversations I've had with him, is that he has an incredible spark for life, which means that he did not just survive the Holocaust. Following the Holocaust, he thrived, and he made a life for himself. And as you can read, certainly from this bio, certainly what he's going to share with us today, he made an incredible life that all of us can be proud of and should emulate. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Cantor David Wisnia. Also, his grandson is somewhere here, Avi, who will be accompanying him later on the keyboard. I welcome Cantor David Wisnia to Brothers of this Room.
It's the best applause I've gotten, so thank you very much. Rabbis, people, brothers of Israel. I have a problem. I sing much better than I speak, I think. I grew up and saved my life by singing. I therefore am going to have to start telling my story backwards, which means I just returned from Los Angeles, where I had the unusual, show you what a small world this is. I performed for my only friend who is still alive, and you have to remember most of us are reaching way up there. They're 90s, although I haven't made it yet. I performed in a synagogue in Los Angeles. My friend, Ralph Hackman, who came from Auschwitz, I'm talking about real friends from Auschwitz. There aren't many, or there weren't many left to begin with. And the one that I just saw turns out to be, guess what, a classmate of Rabbi Gaber. And as I sang, and I insisted, sort of put forth a request to Rabbi Gaber, I would love to do Avinu Shebashamayim, which is the song, the prayer for peace for the army, IDF in Israel, or for Israel itself. It went over like crazy, so I thought I would do that as well. And Rabbi is gracious enough to allow me to substitute one of the songs. Again, I sing much better than I speak, but I will try and give you all the info that you really would like to know or that is not known. The most important thing of this whole system is that I lived two lives. My first report to the 101st Airborne that I was with at the end of the war, for the last 3 months of the war, consisted of really starting a new life. In other words, my life ended at the age of 13, 14, when I came home in the Warsaw Ghetto and found my family murdered. I'm talking about my father, who was 41, my mother is 37, my little brother 2.5 years younger than I, and my elder brother who escaped to Auschwitz, which was a suburb not too far away from Warsaw. That was the first try of grabbing people to ship to Treblinka. I'm talking about 1941. as the German armies attacked Russia. Everything was fine. We lived in the ghetto in Warsaw. But again, let me do it backwards. I did this, Avinu Shabashamayim, back to the first part of the story, in, what was the name of the synagogue? Beth Am, right.
Yeah. And he wasn't actually a classmate of mine. He's about 4 or 5 years younger than I am. He was the younger brother of a very close friend of mine.
No wonder, no wonder. You looked younger than me.
Well, yes, he was a classmate.
Anyway, many people, I did this, I went out to Los Angeles and just came back about 3 days ago and did the service, but one thing, and again, my speech will be out of order, but I think you'll get the idea of it. The greatest thrill that I had, at least one of the greatest thrills that I had going to LA and being at that service last Friday night and doing a part of the service was finding out that there is a resurgence in Poland, believe it or not, of Judaism. It's the only part. I thought that Judaism was dead as far as Poland was concerned, because the thriving communities, Jewish communities of Warsaw, are indescribable. Most people don't have the slightest idea what kind of a life, a Jewish life. Warsaw was 50 to 60% Jewish. Everything was Jewish. The theater was Jewish. The opera was Jewish. Most of the huge businesses were Jewish. My father had a shop, an upholstery shop, and employed some people. I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but that's aside the point. Anyway, back to the, if I can sort of get back to the beginning. Most people live their lives, that's the speech that I made, and I want to take a part of it. At the first gathering of my Army outfit, the 101st Airborne, 506 Parachute Infantry, that I joined in the end of February, beginning of March, 1945. I was in Auschwitz since 1942. There were no crematoriums yet when we got there, or at least crematorium 3, 4, and 5 were not built yet. We built them. There was only a little white house that was used for gassing or killing or shooting the people. As a matter of fact, night transport was not gassed, it was machine gun. It's not a beautiful story, but I'm telling it to you because most people have their lives, you know, memories of their lives, chronology, order. But my life is much different than most people here in the United States. And therefore, I have lived 2 different lives. This is a speech, by the way, I made at the first gathering of the 101st Airborne when they found out in Orlando, Florida, about 15 years ago that I was alive. And since then, if you want to Google in YouTube, you'll find me singing the national anthem. I'm talking about the American national anthem. Every year, we just did the same thing in Tampa 3 weeks ago. I went from the sublime to the ridiculous. I went from Warsaw, Poland, or Auschwitz, Poland, to Tampa, Florida. And in Tampa, Florida, I sang the national anthem for the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the 101st Airborne Division Association, of which I am a proud member and an honored member, and you have to see the greatest thrill. I am still little Davy. That's what they know. And I have a picture here, anyone who would like to see it. What a good-looking picture of me and my revered, beautiful Thompson machine gun that they taught me how to use. I became the formal interpreter anyway. I told you I will be going out of order, but I think you'll get the idea. The Holocaust and the life I experienced during the 6 years of the war, I keep in a guarded place in my mind. For many years, people would ask me how old I was, and I would always tell them 6 years less than my age, simply because I did not count the years of World War II and the Holocaust. In fact, I had all of the numbers that were tattooed on my left forearm in the front removed, except for a shadow of the last number, which is still visible. The top of number 6 is still visible because plastic surgery was not perfected when I came to the United States. Came to Philadelphia and went to look for a doctor to, had I known that I wasn't going to be able to sleep for about a year because it pulled, they just pulled it together, you could still see it. Anyway, I removed it all because I got tired and sick of answering questions. What is this number? It wasn't fashionable to speak about the Holocaust then. So I kept on getting away from that. I lived on 170th Street in the Concourse in the Bronx. And believe it or not, there was a diner there, and I loved to wear short-sleeve shirts. And everybody kept, what's this number? I finally got the clever idea. I told them it was my telephone number. And they believed it, too. Really. Anyway, as I am approaching the 71st now anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, by the Russian army, it is beyond my ability to fully express or comprehend what happened to me in those 6 years of World War II. I will try to the best of my ability to convey and describe my life as a prisoner in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Death camp, I never left it from the moment I got to Auschwitz. Many prisoners were switched from one camp to another. I stayed right there. I loved it so much I would not. Anyway, I lived there for 2.5 years, close to 3 years. It's not a pleasant journey, but it is my hope and faith in God, and I did not lose my faith in God. That God did not do this, remember that. It's people who did it. The human race will eventually come to its senses and learn to live in peace on earth. With the passing of time, the number of veterans of World War II and survivors of the Holocaust are passing at a very alarming rate. This has given me concern that the next generation will not know or learn from both of these tragic events. The reason for me sitting down here telling this story, and the reason, by the way, that finally, after 7 years of trying, the story of my stint in Auschwitz, if you can call it that, and the joining with the 101st Airborne in the liberation of, I would say, Bergdorf. I was one of the first to walk into Hitler's redoubt and took out a little Walter pistol, and they told little Davy, take what you want. We're talking about May 1st, 1945. Remember, the war was over on May 7th. To go back to what I started telling you about that 90th birthday, only God knows, the rich or poor is good to have money. When I went out to California just now and sang at the birthday party, there were 150 people. I shouldn't be telling this in a conservative synagogue, really, who were treated to prime beef, roast beef dinner at Laurie's. Can you imagine that? And I'm talking about Los Angeles now. And that's again where I met Rabbi's friend. I conveyed to him the regards, you know, from Rabbi Gaber, and all he wanted, and when I could not think of the name of his synagogue, or the synagogue, I told him about the synagogue here. Very thriving, beautiful. It's an Olympic, for those of you who know California, Olympic in La Cienega. It's the most magnificent place. And they have actually 2 or 3 congregations in that one congregation. One is a little more orthodox than the next one, so they don't bother with the more liberal one. And I tried to sing Sim Shalom. As I told you, I sing much better. You'll hear it. If I still may say, God gives me, my voice is still holding out. And by the way, I still work part-time. For those of you who do not know, I just completed a stint of 23 years at Har Sinai in Trenton with choir, organ, and all my music, please remember, is the real traditional Chazanut, even though it was a Reform congregation, with the Untanem Tokef, for those who know what I'm talking about, sung by Cantor, may he rest in peace, Moshe Kusavitsky, and before that, Cantor Gershon Sirota in his choir when I was only about 9 or 10 years old. I think it would be much better, most of you know the horrors of World War II, you've read, you've listened to talks. It would be much, much wiser if I could get some questions, and not crazy questions, they let us, you know, celebrate the holidays. Would you believe it? I got a question like that from somebody. Would they let us celebrate the holidays in Auschwitz? Who in fact knew what holiday was? We didn't realize that at all. I will only tell you quickly, I escaped from the Warsaw Ghetto when my family was murdered. Through the courtesy of a Christian, there are some righteous Christians. Not many, but there are. Now, I frankly don't know how many righteous Jews would have been if the situation would have been reversed. He risked his life. Mr. Vladek Milevsky, whom I just went to offer a mass at the church from which one he was buried in a little suburb of Warsaw, Sochachev, who led me across the border into what was then Germany, believe it or not, about 20 miles away, and then came back. Saved my life, risked his life. Had they caught him, they would have killed him and killed me too. From that little suburb outside of Sochachev, I didn't stay there very long. They took me to, I didn't have any papers. You don't know what I'm talking about, papers. When you don't have any papers, any identification, particularly at that time, you know what happens. You can't eat. You don't get any rations, and you don't get any bread. You don't get anything. I made my way to that little ghetto there in Chervinsk, which is a little suburb, and from there, because of not having any ID, taken on a transport of the last transport from the larger ghetto, Novi Dvor, which was not too far away. See, the Germans had a system. The Nazis had a way of operating. They'd planned this for years, and everything was done in steps. It was not done immediately, and the euphemism of, you know, being resettled permeated the whole area. Everybody, somewhere they were going to be resettled because Jews don't like to work. Jews like to, you know, they're rich, which is a lie to begin with. In Poland, just for your edification, my dear people, there were 3.5 million Jews, or close to that, 10% of the population. I would say, and by the way, there was no middle class in Poland. Contrary to what most people think, the Jews were not rich. As a matter of fact, they barely eked out a living. 90% of the Jewish people were poor. Now, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, as I told you, because my father he was a carpenter, and he had an upholstery shop supplying furniture to stores, to the largest stores in Warsaw. But again, as I said before, Warsaw was Jewish. Everything was Jewish. Frankly, my own life was like, as I said, having a silver spoon in my mouth, born with. I went to a Hebrew school. My languages, believe it or not, were not Yiddish. I had to learn Yiddish from German. My languages were, in the Abner school system, Hebrew, basic, Hebrew, and Polish. Every subject was in those two languages. I can multiply in Hebrew. Now, if you want to know how tough things are, you go and multiply a samach by a dollar. Really. So my languages are, and as a cause of that, I learned in Tarbut, which came right after finishing grade school, so-called Talmud, translation not from Aramaic to Yiddish, but Aramaic to Hebrew. It gave me a grasp because I have a good ear. I better have a good ear, you know. Music is my life. So I learned very quickly practically every language I could converse, any Slavish tongue. It's not that difficult once you know one Slavish tongue. Okay, whether it's Polish, Slovak, Yugoslavian, Serbian, you'll understand. Russian I have a little problem with because they use the Cyrillic alphabet. But I had learned French, I had learned German, and all these languages came, there must be something there, really, handy when I got into Auschwitz. I will only tell you the first part of my stint in Auschwitz. When our 1,500 people came in, you'll hear it from the person who actually lived it, who saw it. Our transport from Newtown came into Auschwitz siding, never heard of Auschwitz in our lives. In Polish, it's called Oświęcim. As a matter of fact, if you want to hear, there are two songs that I composed while in Auschwitz. One is in, believe it or not, Polish. It's a parody. It's in the museum in Washington. If you ever go into the Holocaust Museum, go up to the 4th floor and ask for music from Auschwitz. That's all you're going to hear. There's no other music. You have Oświęcim in Polish and das kleine weiße Häuserle, that little white house telling the story of what happened there when I got there. And it has about 12 or 13 stanzas in Yiddish, and it's recorded with the help of some people. But I'm happy to tell you that, what's that college down in South Jersey? I'm sorry? Stockton, right. And finally publishing the book, and it's going to be ready next month, and the title is going to be The Right Time at the Right Place, because I happen to have been at the right time at the right place. That's how I survived. And you will also see the picture on top of the cover, the entrance to the Death Gate in Birkenau, you know, with the railroad cars. And I had just sang the, here we say, Keil Male Rahamim. Okay, I am going to do the same thing here with the help of my wonderful grandson, who happens to be an accomplished pianist, all right, in his own right. Anyway, he's a graduate of NYU Music School Academy. The first week in Auschwitz will give you an idea of what happened. Out of the 1,500 people who arrived, and by the way, I have a book in Polish that I purchased in Auschwitz when I first went back there in the 50s, 1957 or 58. That gives me every single record of every transport that came into Auschwitz from 1939, the end of 1939, where there were only Christian Poles, by the way. When I got to Auschwitz, there weren't too many Jews yet. Most of them were priests, Russian prisoners of war, and they were treated even worse than the Jews. Anyway, out of the 1,500 who arrived at the siding in Auschwitz, and I heard that SS men say, you know, to his underlings over there, and it wasn't Mengele yet. Mengele didn't start till the following year. I know who it was, Enders, Joachim Enders. He was hung, by the way, by the Poles at the end of the war. And he turned me over to the left side, actually, because he looked at me, and I heard him say, I understood German, of course, Lieber 18 zum Lager. I didn't know what in the world he meant. But I found out later what it meant was everybody over 18 to the camp. The rest went on trucks. And of course we know what happened to the rest. The first, they selected out of this group 570 or 578 young-looking men. All the women, children who were there in the transport were turned over to the right and went on trucks. We didn't know until the following day what happened, when we finally began to ask some of the prisoners in there, where are the rest? Where are the women? Where are the children? They started to laugh at us. You see the fire out there? That's where they are. Now, who in the world could have ever imagined that the most civilized country in Europe, and believe it or not, that's what Germany was, the most civilized country, at least sounded, most educated country in the world, could stoop to something like this. They weren't living anymore. They started to laugh at us. Anyway, the first week, my job was dragging bodies from the ditch around the circumference of the camp, if you've seen the electric barbed wire fences in Birkenau. I was only in Birkenau. Every day, when people, as a matter of fact, the day after we came in, there was a group from Berlin itself of Germans, what they called Mischlinge, which means one had a wife who wasn't German, or who wasn't Jewish, one who had a father or grandfather who wasn't, or grandmother. That's what they called them. And these people came in and found out what happened to their families, what happened to them, really, to the group that went before them. They tried to commit suicide. It was easier to do that than to stand. And that was my job, to drag bodies. Had I continued from the ditch into a wagon and taken to the pits, it's not fathomable, really. It's no wonder there are still people who say it didn't happen. I can understand that, of course. Anyway, The wind-up was at the end of the first couple. I looked strong enough. I'll show you the picture of what I looked like when I met the 101st Airborne. You'll see what I'm talking about. I was chosen to be part of that commando for the first couple of weeks. Had I continued, or had to continue doing this, I would have never made it. One night, coming back into cell block 15 in Birkenau, the cell block leader yells out, just after we came back from the work, "Who can sing here?" Believe it or not, in this chaos, who can sing? Now everybody knew Wisnia could sing. It pushed me down from the books on the top floor, and it's still there, and I chiseled my name into it. If you ever go to visit Birkenau, cell block 15 on the main road, I chiseled in my name in 1957, and it's still there. Somebody told me last year they went to visit. I told them where to go. From that moment on, I became a privileged prisoner. As you will see in the book that is going to come out, hopefully, you'll take a look at it. It gives you every single detail. I insisted that they not keep most of the detailed records of what I did while in camp, what made me survive. But you will see how I escaped the details. I will leave it to any questions you might have. I think that might be much easier to deal with than going through telling you what a day consisted of. Anyway, a march, as you see in the billet doux here in that program, death march to Dachau. I tried to escape with a group of able-bodied boys. Didn't make it. They rounded us up. I thought they were going to kill us. Put us back on trains, and then I was asked, or I hung around in Dachau. I was only there for a couple of weeks. By the way, I was just called from Munich last week or 2 weeks ago. Would I like to go to Dachau for the liberation of Dachau that is going to occur in May 1st? I told them no, I had enough. It's a little bit too much. I was only in Dachau, as I said, for about 2 weeks. In my second life, as I told you, my first life had ended. When I came to Auschwitz, there was no life, there was no living. On one fine morning when I made my escape, all by myself, somewhere in Germany, not too far away from Munich. Please bear in mind that that was the beginning of March, 1945. We were used to being strafed when we marched from Auschwitz on one of the last transports in 1944. December 1944, we marched out of Auschwitz. Came to a town called Gleiwitz, then put on trains to Dachau, and then Dachau was just as beautiful, what a beautiful, as organized, I should say, as Auschwitz was. Deathly, Dachau was the direct opposite. No food, no place to sit, no place to sleep, no place for anything. Why? Because the front, the Russian front, came closer into Germany from one side, and little did we know that the Allies were coming from the other side. We knew there was fighting going on, but one fine blue morning, by the way, we saw those, when they scraped us out of Auschwitz, we saw those red planes, red stars on the planes across. Of course, we knew that was right. So we expected or I expected, for whatever reason, that it was going to be Russians that I encountered. Well, we are now in Germany, and we are being taken. I volunteered to go down south towards Austria. We hung around the Schreibstube, which means the office, just waiting for some way to get out, because I never believed I was going to live through Dachau. To me, Auschwitz was already all pet. So Dachau was the worst. I volunteered. I was strong enough to carry. They asked anyone who can carry 25, I think it was 25 pounds of cement. They were building the underground bunkers for their planes going down towards Austria. I was the first to volunteer, and that's where I made my escape. You'll see the details of it when you get the book. I'll go into the details how I did that. I did it now all by myself. But the beautiful part, and I'll finish with this and let you ask any questions you have. Escaping from that, we were bombed now by American planes, but we didn't know that. To us, the bombing or strafing of the trains, because the Germans used to attach their tanks, their armor, to the trains that were leading us towards Austria. Well, they tried, and one fine, beautiful morning, when I made my way, when we got out of the trains, they put us into the ravines around the edges of the trains, tracks. And I decided I wasn't going to make it. They're not going to let us live anyway. I might as well try to escape on my own. I did, after a few days wandering, and no compass, no nothing. I didn't know where I was. Oh, I knew it was German. I could see the fields, places. Anyway, hiding in barns. There was more food in the barns than I had seen for years. And one fine, beautiful, I walked towards the fire, towards the front, wherever the fire was coming from. I was smart enough to realize I must be going in the other direction than going back towards the right. Because remember, Germany took a third of Poland, Russia took a third of Poland. So the Russian armies kept on moving into Germany. And as the planes started to strafe the train, they got us out of the trains into the ravines, and that's where I made my escape. For 2 days wandering in the direction of the fire, I hear a roar of tanks looking for a place to hide during the day, because if they caught me, no matter where or how, they probably would have killed me anyway. But there was already chaos. A way to explain something like this. It wasn't the German army that we used to see with the young SS-men. It became older by the second, so to speak. As they are, I hear a roar of tanks, and believe me, I learned to pray, even though it might not have been so much prayer. I prayed, don't let there be a swastika on the lead tanks, I could hear, or a black cross, because in World War II. Well, the first tank approaches, and I thought it would be funny, really, for you people to hear this from the mouth who experienced it. A whole column of tanks approaches on the most gorgeous highway as I overlooked from that hill. And by the way, my last buddy from the 101st, who just passed away 2 weeks ago, Fred Ballou, still, every time he looked at me, little Davey, you're doing all right, Davey. So, as the first tank approaches, there's a column of about 15, 18 tanks, trucks, and you name it, coming down that most magnificent highway, and I'm on a little bitty hill. And I look down and I see the first tank, and it has a star on it. And to me, of course, a star was Russian, right? But it was a white star. Who cared? White star, red star, green star, as long as it wasn't a swastika or a black cross. I, with all my might, start running down, and I had already stolen civilian clothes. I had everything. Got down right in front. Did you ever see, some of you people must have seen that Chinese in front of the tanks that they had in the square? Do you remember that one? Years ago. And that's approximately what happened. 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, and there was a column of tanks, and there was this young kid, really, in civilian clothes, little hair. They used to shave up hair anyway, well, the old prisoners. So, and there he's standing, the whole column. You don't know how important. Rabbi Gabriel thought that was important. You don't know how important that is. The whole column stopped. Out of the first tank, the hatch of the first tank, walks out Captain James L. Walker from Sakhalin. He crawls out and he comes over to me, and I'm standing right in front of him. I'm a little kid, and he says to me, "Escape?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "SS?" "Yes." I sort of made up what he's trying to tell me. He wants to, I should take them back to where I escaped from. I'm going back nowhere that way. So I said, "You Russian?" He said, in holding English, he says, "No, American." I figured, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble because we heard stories that Germans disguised themselves as in American uniforms right after the Battle of the Bulge, if you followed World War II. Anyway, he tries, he says, no, American. I says, no, star. He says, "Yeah, white star." I mean, as I said, white star, green star, who cares? Anyway, I had a brainstorm. I said, wait a minute, if he's American, if that's true, then must have somebody who can speak Polish. So I said, "Any Polish?" He says to me, "Yeah, we got one." Yells down, the whole column, you have to see that this is going to be in a movie, really. It is. They're doing this in Poland, as a matter of fact. That's what I just got through. I didn't tell you about this, but somebody came. You know who Ashkenazi is? Anyway, he's the one who sponsors the new congregations in Poland. And I'll get back to that in one second. So, I don't want to finish that particular part. In his southern accent, I never heard such English in my life. Remember, when you learn a language, what do you learn? You learn either the dirty words or the, words, not sentences. And he's talking about, "Yeah, man, no, come back." I says, "Nah, that couldn't be English, that must be believe it." Wind up, he says to me, he yells down, "Fred Wilczek, Fred Wilczek." They carry down a column, you never saw anything like it. The Jeep comes alongside the, tanks, and out of the Jeep crawls out Fred Wilczek from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Fred Wilczek comes over to me and he says, yes, he can't speak a word of Polish. His Polish is worse than my English. finally, I didn't believe him. I said, any Yiddish? I figured if he's American, you don't say Jewish, you see, in Europe, it's Yiddish, because Jews speak Yiddish, okay? He says, yeah, we got one. Yells down, Harry Wiener, Harry Wiener. Another Jeep comes up. I'm telling you, it's a classic. The Jeep comes out with Harry Wiener in it, and gets out of the Jeep, comes over to me, and Fred is standing right next to him, and he starts talking Yiddish. You bist laughing. I says, what are you talking about? He says he lived in Brooklyn. I hear words, you know, but I figured, well, if he's trying already to get somebody in Polish and somebody in Yiddish, they must be Americans. But I still didn't trust them because we were quite convinced. You know, it was very difficult after 3 years of that horror to think, I made it. I finally said, hey, Wisnia, you made it, all right? Took me down the Jeep, and this fellow who just passed away remembered the part when I came down that hill. And he's the one who was telling that story to everybody over in Orlando, Florida, when we had that gathering of the 101st, about 15, 16 years ago. Anyway, wind up. I never left 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, H Company, and I became formally the interpreter, believe it or not. That was my designation. I could not join as a full-fledged army soldier, but they taught me because I spoke German, I spoke Polish. They wanted me to serve as their interpreter. Never left them until we came to the first Berchtesgaden. I have a picture here of the barrier. I'm standing there in uniform, and until I came to the United States. Now, I thought you'd get a kick out of something like this, told as the first story, really, from somebody who went through it. If there are any questions, please. But don't ask me if we observed holidays. No, we didn't observe any holidays.
Cantor,
Yes.
do you recall when things started to deteriorate? When you were living in your home and the business was thriving, when did it start to turn? Do you remember?
I remember the day, it was my birthday when the war broke out. My father didn't believe it. I woke him up and I saw the first planes over our house in Warsaw. Our building, and Krochmalna and Żelazna, still standing there. It was a funny thing, it's a small world. I was with my grandson. Just now, he accompanied me to go to that 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, where I sang the Mali that I'm going to do here. And you could see it on YouTube, actually, as my robe, my hat. I wanted to make sure that I was Jewish, all right? My talit, my tarah, the whole business. It was just unbelievable. We walk into they were going to meet us in Katowice, which is right next, not too far from Auschwitz. There was a train from Warsaw. We stayed in Warsaw and went to Katowice, which is a city not too far from Auschwitz. And one of the assistants of the director of the Auschwitz Museum was going to pick us up. And he came to pick us up, a fellow by the name of, listen to this, Szymon Kowalski. I thought he was Jewish. He's not. Now it's fashionable, I started telling you, to be Jewish in Poland. This is absolutely unheard of. The only country that there's a chance for Judaism to thrive now, believe it or not, only two countries, Poland, Germany. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. There's a rabbinic school now opening up in Berlin.
Yes.
I know, my son is taking it. Incredible, absolutely. If I could live, and that was my speech I did with my grandson. We're going to meet in a few minutes. Friday night to the first Conservadox Reform together congregation outside of Warsaw in Wilanu, which is right, Warsaw actually. It's not the Nashik synagogue that you'll see, or it's not the Tlomackie synagogue. Well, I sang in an 80-piece choir. Really, as a soloist, it's not that, but it's a small congregation of, it was unbelievable. 85 people, and I have a witness here to tell you what happened right after the service. And I sang as part of the service with him accompanying me. And it was just incredible. At the end of the service, they served dinner, and they had Israeli dancing. And listen to this one. If I could live to see this, anything could happen. Out of the 85 members of that congregation, I would say that about 80% are young, former Christian Poles, young, not families, or people who had an ancestor who was Jewish. I'm talking about the majority of them, who learned biblical stories and became interested in Judaism and wanted to find out what happened to all the Jews that were here. And let me tell you, it's quite something. If I can advertise a trip for anybody, go to Poland and see that new museum in Warsaw. It is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I sat in King Jan Sobieski's chair. I have a picture of it. One of the Polish kings that they have over there. Really. My grandson is laughing. That's right. It's the actual chair of the king, whom they preserved in Krakow somewhere. Anyway, I hope I answered. But that's the only place. Who would have ever believed that Poland, of all the people, and you know the stories about Poland were horrible. Why? You know, they were true because the anti-Semitism in Poland was, what would I call it, encouraged by the church. But you see, all that has changed. See, Pope John the 22nd, or Pope Paul, that whole thing has changed. It's completely different. Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Did you find your brother? What was did you reconnect with your brother? You said he escaped from the ghetto.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Did you
you.
reconnect with your brother?
My brother, my older, no, I found out right after the war was over. The first time I went back with my Brooklyn-born wife to Poland, and I went to say Mass, or to the church there to pay to the priest. I found out that he was killed in escaping from Treblinka. He tried to escape from Treblinka. So I had no family. To me, the 101st Airborne became my family. And they treat me, you just have no idea. When I get down to Florida for that winter gathering of the 101st Airborne, I'm like the revered, honored veteran. As a matter of fact, there's a group in Poland that I took out for lunch at the Hilton in Warsaw, reenactors of the 101st of the Battle of the Bulge from the Polish Army. And this time, I did this 2 years ago, and this time, when I went there, they took me out.
Albert?
Yes.
My question is, it's very encouraging to hear in Poland that the Jews are somewhat accepted versus what's happening in the whole
They're
world.
questioning. They're
So-
questioning.
Yeah, and so that's encouraging.
Yeah.
What is the relationship of Poland with Israel?
Excellent,
Okay, contrary to, let's say, the other Europeans.
excellent, excellent. You have no idea. I am quite active in the Friends for Israel Defense Forces, and I just attended the last gathering where they collected $25 million, for wounded Israeli soldiers. So I am an honored guest. It was a $1,000 plate dinner, and I'm usually asked to go as a guest of Captain Yuri Tabak, who is a captain in the Navy, American Navy, one of the first Russian emigres who became a captain in the American Navy. Yes.
Obviously, our first connection I made with my uncle who was gunned down in the streets of Warsaw. And from what I read in the past, what actually happened with the ghetto? Was it the Nazis? Was there a great armed resistance? Did the Nazis?
I was not there anymore. Please remember, I escaped from the Warsaw. What does a kid do? I was 16 years old. What in the world was I going to do? I came home, I found a whole block surrounded by SS and Jewish police. This was the first action. You see, until Germany attacked Russia, there was some modicum of civility. There was the Wehrmacht controlling the gates. You follow gendarmerie. But when, June or July 21st, 1941, something like that. When the Germans attacked Russia, they took their gloves off. That was the end. There was no more school, there was no more anything. I was supposed to graduate from Tarbut. Nothing. The end of the last service, if I can remember, at the Tlomatske synagogue. And by the way, Stalin is the one who got Kusevitsky out of, he was a tenor, and quite a famous tenor in Poland. And I'll never forget, Stalin got him out and to sing in Moscow. And that's how we survived the war. I will never forget when I first saw him, he knew who I was, but remember, we had an 80-piece choir, you can imagine. The Tlomatske synagogue seated about 2,500 people. You're not talking about a little bitty synagogue. We're talking about the most magnificent. Something that was, even though it was only Orthodox prayer books, it was considered the Reform synagogue in Warsaw. Why? Because most of the Jews who used to drive up in either a taxi, for services, or park it, you follow it in cars, or a droshka, you know what the droshka is? Horse and buggy, fancy ones, to the services and get out and go to service. And we had an organ that wasn't played on Friday, it was about, remember that, but played for weddings or any kind of fancy, affair. You see, there was a total dichotomy, if you can call it, of classes. There was no such thing as you see here, middle class mixed with whomever, whether they have, they don't have, mostly not so in Poland. I hope I answered it. Yes.
We're going to take one more question.
Go ahead.
Dan.
I was wondering when you got into Auschwitz, how old were you?
16. I convinced myself I was 18. Meaning, I was born August 31st, 1926.
And I was wondering.
And I was telling him August 31st, 1924. Because at 18, I was like a grown-up, you follow with the people, and I was taller now. So I had myself so convinced, I still don't know what I am. All my records show 2 years older. Because You can't imagine what one can do to brainwash himself.
Can you tell us I was wondering what kept you going and what the daily life was like when you first got to Auschwitz?
Daily life. For whom?
For you.
You know, like you go to a prison, you don't know. You go to a prison here, you become a trustee. You stay in prison for a while, you know your way around. Okay? This is crazy. When you get the book, here I'm promoting the book. You want to break up? I had a girlfriend in Auschwitz. There was no such thing in Auschwitz. But I had a girlfriend in Auschwitz. And she was a very famous, and I didn't want them to use that in the book, but they insisted. Sex sells. Really. And after 2 years in Auschwitz, she was the assistant. She's still living. She is 9. I had no idea. She was 8 years older than I. Okay. Anyway, this is part of the story. What makes my story so different is that there are many stories of the Holocaust. There are many things happening. And as I told you, you can look up in that book that I have. You give me a number of somebody, you follow me, who was in Auschwitz. Everybody who was in Auschwitz had a number. Either outside, inside, or an A, B. That was to confuse the situation. I can explain that to you. But most of them came in 1943, 44, really. The Hungarian transports when they started to come. But I could tell you, if you give me the number, how many people came under transport, how many people were immediately killed, and how many, according to the German records, one thing they know how to do. As a matter of fact, you want to give me 2 more minutes, I want to tell them this story. I have proved that there is a God. How do you like that? I'm saying this in front of rabbis in the synagogue. I have proof. Listen to this. 2 years ago, I just thought of that. 2 years ago, I would never buy anything German. But you can understand why. I tried to stay away because German, but it's stupidity, really, on my part, because you can't blame a whole nation for what, even though the majority cooperated in it. It was a good sale, good propaganda. Remember that. And I could see what propaganda can do here, too. So that gives you an idea. Anyway, 2 years ago, I am very active in an organization called CUFI. C-U-F-I, Christians United for Israel. I'm not Christian. I'm a verbrannte Jew as you'll never find, because I know why I'm Jewish. Anyway, and what it is I'm Jewish about. I read in the paper. Anyway, I go to CUFI, to the convention in Washington, and on the way back with that friend who celebrated his 90th birthday, we get into an accident. And by the way, I always drove, if you can remember, a little Jaguar. I love to live well. A little Jaguar convertible. Since 1967 or something like that, always. And 2-3 years later, a new one. I did fine. They have all my records, of course, in Germany, when I arrived, when I left, blah, 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 the whole bit. So, I read in the paper. Anyway, I had an accident on the way back, demolished on Route 95, where it meets 295 near Washington, if you know where I'm talking about. You're coming up 95, and there's like a circle, and the cars were parked. And I smacked him with that front of that beautiful Jaguar room. Anyway, I'm out looking for a new car. 2 weeks after the accident, I have a friend, quite a few friends. This one happens to be Italian. And I meet every Monday, I meet him, we still do it, over in Trenton for dinner. So he says, why don't you go into BMW and buy a BMW? Their cars are good. I says, oh, I know they know how to make cars, but I don't buy German cars. He says, go in and find out. I see an article in Martyrdom and Resistance. If any of you are survivors, there is a newspaper. It tells a story that the German government decided to pay Social Security, listen to this one, to people who worked voluntarily for the German occupation forces in Poland. I figured I only worked for government very few hours or time. One in particular when my family was killed. I said, let me try it. I sent in my application. Would you believe it? About 3 weeks later, I get an answer, yes, we have a record of a Wisnia working at Cantor Airport, which is now the Chopin Airport in Warsaw, and you are entitled to Social Security. I go into BMW in Princeton. Wait, listen to this. I go into BMW in Princeton, and I said, I want to speak to the top man. The guy says, the manager gets me the man. No, I want to talk to the man, representative from BMW from Germany. To cut the story short, I was going to have a meeting with him, and I didn't start speaking German, but after a few minutes of conversation, I said to him in German, what would I have to do in order to get that hardtop convertible BMW that you have out there? He says, well, it's $2,000 down and $500 a month, you know, to lease. I don't want to buy it. I'll lease the car for 3 years. Okay. He says, well, that's what the rule is. I said, listen, I don't have, I start German. I said, I don't have $2,000. But I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you that Deutsche Bank is going to transfer 490, I don't know what that was, anyway, a month directly to you for the payment. He looks at me and says, who are you? I says, oh, I was just informed and I thought I was going to get. Unfortunately, my grandson is driving his car, but guess what Wisnia is driving? Brand new BMW hardtop convertible, the most wonderful car you ever saw. And who is paying for it? The German government. There's the
I'd like to thank Cantor Wisnia for being here, for sharing his story with us, for helping us to carry on and share his story going forward. Thank you very much. We are now going to continue with a memorial service. I'm going to invite everyone to please rise for a moment as we light these 6 candles in memory of the 6 million. May be seated. As we turn to our pamphlets, a number of people have been asked to participate today. We'll begin with the responsive reading. This will be led by Aaliyah and Ashley Hoffman.
The ark of the Torah, a faith of learning, stands empty and abandoned.
We have come here to remember those who cannot be forgotten.
We have come to speak of that which cannot be spoken of unless now we let them say.
We have come to remind not others but ourselves of what was done and what was not done.
We have come to ask questions that cannot be answered but cannot be let them ask.
We know how to remember the dead who may know.
We know how to remember the death of one person.
But all of us are mourners, all of us recall not one but 6 million ones.
Not only those we have known, but those no one can know, the names that our brother lost.
As we commemorate the death of our 6 million brothers and sisters, we honor and remember them all, Jews and Gentiles, victims, martyrs, and heroes.
We honor those who died because they were Jews. We honor those who died because they helped Jews. Those who died because they resisted the Nazis, and those who died because of their ideals and convictions.
We honor those who were tortured, impoverished, dehumanized, deported, enslaved, and murdered.
Together, no one wanted to believe, not Christian, not Jew, for who can confront the terrible reality of the murder of an entire people? Who can confront the murder of innocents, murdered only because they were born, murdered as a government policy?
They were murdered while the world was silent. They were murdered while the world pretended not to notice. They were murdered, most, but not all. There were survivors.
There are survivors of the Holocaust. We know them. They are the parents whose children are gone, and they are the children without parents.
We know them. They are remnants. No brothers, no sisters, no aunts, no uncles, no grandparents, no cousins, no neighbors, no friends.
We know them, the survivors, because they are a part of us. They belong to us. We are all members of a single family, haunted by our shared memories. So many were begrudged their very right to exist, and we were robbed of the gifts they would have given to humanity. We mourn the blameless murderer, the old and the young. We hallow the memory of our martyred innocents.
Guardian of Israel, guard the remnant of Israel.
And preserve the people of Israel who proclaim Shema Yisrael.
Guardian of a unique people, guard the remnants of that people.
And preserve that people who affirm Adonai is our God, Adonai alone.
Guardian of a holy people, guard the remnants of that holy people.
And preserve that holy people who chant in praise of the Holy One. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh.
For these do I weep, and for the millions crowded in ghettos and in detention camps. For those wandering in forest, and those hidden in attics and in the underground bunkers. For those who found refuge in the bosom of another faith, or who lost their God, or who were given over to experiments at the hands of wild beasts called doctors and scientists. For those who died of hunger and of thirst, smothered to death in freight trains or in gas chambers, shot, buried, smothered, alive or cremated. For those who were brought out to be killed by hanging so that they would be seen. And for those who sanctified God's name and the name of the people Israel, refusing to be subdued, fighting to the death. For those who lost their homes, their dignity, and their hope. And for those left alive to live the horror anew, day after day, moment after moment. For these do I weep. For infants who never learned to say, Mommy. For boys and girls whose youth were stolen from them, who withered before coming to blossom. For young men and women who were never blessed beneath the wedding canopy. For the elderly denied the privilege of a gracious old age. For the orchestras and for the music, and for all the world's beauty whose rainbow of colors was lost, replaced by only brown and gray and black. For all these do I weep.
we'd like to invite Cantor Wisnia to sing for us Avinu Shabashamayim, our parent in heaven, a prayer for the state of Israel. This is going to substitute Ani Ma'ani.
The refrain of this prayer, I'm sure, is quite familiar to most of you. It was made famous by the chief cantor of the Israeli Armed Forces, Shai Abramson. I am no tenor, I'll do it thanks to my grandson here who wrote it down a little bit on baritone. So we will do Avinu Shabashamayim, our Father in heaven, and you can come in with that. It's very easily learned. Just one line. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzu Yisrael v'Kovalo. That's the only thing, and we come into it a few times. Just to give you an idea what it sounds like. The words. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Go'alo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Go'alo. Barech, Barech, et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, Hagen Alea, Ve'evrat Chazdecha, Ufros Alea Sukat Shlomecha. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Go'alo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Go'alo. U'shelach orcha v'mitcha l'rasheha, sareha, ve'ohateha, v'taknei b'etza tova milpanecha, v'taknei b'etza tova Chazek, 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 et yidei maginei meretz kadshenu, ve'archivem Eloheinu עטרת ניצחון, תיאטרם, חזק, 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 את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, ועטרת ניצחון, תיאטרם, ונתת שלום, שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה. אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל גואלו. אבינו, אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל גואלו.
We continue with the candles of joy, the candles of sorrow, led by Siegel.
Candles we light wherever we are, candles for Hanukkah, candles for Shabbat, candles for Havdalah, braided like a challah, or candles for pure delight. So many, many candles, all kinds of shapes, all kinds of colors, all of them candles of joy. Only one candle is light, to remember someone who died, a candle for the soul, and more candles we light in silence and in honor. 6 candles, a memorial, to myriads who are gone, 6 million. All of them candles of sorrow, Bat Shevat Dagan.
Please rise for the El Malay Rahman.
מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה. למעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהרתי מכל הגטאות, midachau, mi trembling mi kau mi babiar, o mi kola mi komot. Shenergu, ונשחטו, ונתקעו, ונחנקו, בינינו באכזוריות, על ידי פושעים הנאצים הגרמנים. ומתו בייסורים גדולים, והלכו לעולמם. ברור שכל הקהל מתפלל בעד הזכרת נשמתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם מסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, אדוני הוא נחלתם. וינוחו בשלום על משכבם,
Together, the Kaddish of the camps, the next page. Yid Kadash, Yid Kadash Losh, Shemei Rabbah Onar, B'Alman Tivarah Yerutei B'Ayar, B'Yamid Malchutei B'Magan, B'Chayechon
B'Yamechon
Nergen, U'Chayei B'Chol Beit Yisrael Chavna, B'Agalah B'Zman Harid
Nafskan.
B'Yibru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach Le'olam Le'mayah. Yitbarach Yishtabach T'reishesach. B'Yitba'ar B'Yitramah L'Otavah. B'Yitkaseh B'Yitkadar Trablika. B'Yitaleh B'Yitalal L'Yuna. Shemei B'Rishat B'Rinos. Barichu Le'elah Manas. Nikol Berkata B'Shirata Tacha. Fush Berkata B'Nefamata Alis. Daviran Yalma Orsa. B'Yibru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbi Shemaya. V'chayim Aleinu B'Yalkol Yisrael. B'Yibru Amen. Oseh Shalom Yonam. Yaseh Shalom. Aleinu B'Yalkol Yisrael. B'Yibru Amen. Please remain standing for Hatikvah. As we've heard today from Cantor Wisnia, who has taught us throughout his story one piece that I think was truly there all the time, that even in the moments that probably he had the least amount of hope, he found hope for the future. Singing Hatikvah reminds us that the hope is there, the hope to create and to build a thriving land in the state of Israel and a thriving Jewish community in the diaspora, and that together, maybe one day, God willing, as it says at the end of the Mourner's Kaddish, Oseh Shalom B'Romah, Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu B'Yalkol Yisrael Yibru Amen. May God make for us and for the entire world peace, and one day we could all live in Shalom. That's it. Wisnia and to Avi for their presence and for making today a special commemoration. Over to us.